From award-winning children's books to science fiction and dark fantasy, Jessica Marie Baumgartner has woven a positive message throughout so much of her writing. And this week on Excelsior Journeys, Jessica is joining us to share her complete story of how she uses so many different genres to tell so many great stories. JLD, do the honors.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire, and you're listening to the Excelsior Journeys with George Sirois. Prepare to ignite.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Welcome back to Excelsior Journeys. My name is George Sirois. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for listening to over 80 episodes so far. We are not stopping anytime soon. I'm so excited for what the future holds for this show, and I'm also excited to let you know a little bit about a couple of organizations that I've just recently signed up with. In addition to spending a year as vice president and then another year as president of the Missouri Writers Guild, and also being involved in the St. Louis Writers Guild, Excelsior Journeys is also part of the National Podcast Association and a great group of podcasts that are centered around the state of Missouri. And it's just simply called Podcast MO. You can take a look for it online. You can take a look for it on Facebook. You'll find it there. It's a group of different podcasts that cover all different types of genres. The main thing that we all have in common is we're all based in Missouri. So if you are a Missouri native or just a Missouri resident, as I am, I can't believe it's going to be 10 years this August. It's a great site for taking a look and seeing what kind of podcasts this state offers. And it turns out there are a lot. And I brought this up because I truly believe that there is strength in numbers when it comes to what it is that you're doing, especially in podcasting and writing in general, where there is so much dedicated to just one person sitting down at either a microphone or a keyboard or a pad and pen, whatever the case. And because of that, I got to meet our next guest for this week. It just happened to be in the year 2015 when I was doing my latest go around with the St. Louis Writers Guild with their August event, basically just called Writers in the Park. And what that was literally what it sounds like. Different authors that are affiliated with the St. Louis Writers Guild sitting down, they have a table and they get to shop their wares. And so they get to get potentially a whole new audience. You know, families come through, regular people, other people come through, and they have an opportunity to meet with some local authors in a way that they never had before. And it's a great thing for the public because they get to all of a sudden expand their horizons and get to meet something that they didn't even know was there. And it's great for the authors too, because they get to realize that they are a part of a terrific community. And I got to see that front and center when I got to meet my table mate in 2015. And that was Jessica Marie Baumgartner. And she and I immediately clicked. I knew that right from the start, it was just like, okay, this person's awesome. I need this person to kind of be in my life. And sure enough, several years later, she continues to be so. Jessica has been storytelling since childhood. About 9-10 years ago, she really got serious and has since put out over a dozen different works. Her main specialties are children's books, nonfiction, and speculative fiction. She's done short stories as well. She's done all different types of what they call genre hopping, which normally is a big no-no in the world of traditional publishing. But the fact that she's still traditionally published says a lot about the quality of the work that she does. You can even find some of her work in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Come on. And so she is also here not only to talk about her life as a writer, her whole Excelsior journey in general, but she's also going to be talking a lot about All Things Weird and Strange. It's a YA sci-fi fantasy anthology that's going to be coming out soon. And I am so thrilled to get to hear Jessica's full story. And it is my privilege to announce to you, to welcome Jessica Marie Baumgartner. Jessica, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, George.
And thank you so much for being here. So before we go to the beginning of it all, tell us a little bit about All Things Weird and Strange.
All Things Weird and Strange. It's a quick read. So it's just a handful of authors who are very talented who came together and offered up a specific sci-fi or fantasy story that is just a little odd or strange or has a little bit of that mysterious flavor that some publishers don't always open up to, but that readers really need.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun resource for anybody who's just looking, whether it's escapism or whether you're looking to kind of plant your feet while letting your head raise up to the clouds. It's a really fun read that's going to be out next month.
Next month. That's fabulous. That's and the beginning of May, correct?
Yes, May the 4th. Absolutely.
What a great day for a sci-fi title. Come on.
It's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to what I always refer to as the lightning bolt moment, which is when someone experiences something, sees something, hears something, and meets someone and realizes at that moment that is the direction they want to go in. That's the kind of life they want to lead. When it comes to writing, storytelling in general, what was it about that for you?
I know exactly when it was. When I got real serious about writing, it was, I graduated, I got my AA at St. Louis Community College. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do the graduation. Any time in my life that there's been a big celebration, there's also been a tragedy. So I'm like afraid of parties and things to celebrate because it's how it's worked out. So I was just driving to go get my diploma. Yeah. And I pick up my diploma and it was so boring. I walk in and this lady at the desk is like, "Oh, let me get it." And she gets it out and hands it to me and I look at it and I'm just holding this thing that symbolizes an ending and a new beginning. Mm-hmm. And I was like walking back to the car and I felt like I was glowing. And then I sat down in the car and I was driving home and suddenly I realized I had this idea for a children's book that just shot into my head. Mm-hmm. Because, I'm a big pagan weirdo and I love people of all religions, or if you're atheist, whatever, like I'm cool with everybody. Mm-hmm. But I had this idea to write a children's book about a pagan who is learning about all the different religions and really connecting with the core foundation of, the golden rule, which to me is what embodies most religions, or really all of them. Everybody's looking for that, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Mm-hmm. So I ended up writing it on like a teeny tiny piece of paper the second I came home. This little scratch paper, and I knew I had something. I really did. And it was, I found an illustrator online, a friend of a friend. We were on Facebook, and she turned out to be really talented. Laura Winship Finney. She's amazing. She's an art teacher at one of the school districts in our area. And then we found an indie publisher, because a lot of publishers don't want to touch anything having to do with religion at all, even if it's in a positive light.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that was the start. That was where I was like, okay, I'm a writer now, I guess.
I remember the golden rule very well, because I remember not long after we met and after my first recording studio was put together by my father-in-law downstairs in our old house. Mm-hmm. That was around the time when I was really kind of actively looking around for material that I could use to kind of bump up my audio and book narrating portfolio. And I looked up the golden rule and I was just like, this has such a great message. I definitely want to attach myself to this. And that's when I reached out to you to get the authorization to make it into an audiobook. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we turned it around in just like a few days. Like it was brisk, but at the same time, like it was what it needed to be. I think you only had a couple of notes, just about a couple of a couple of things, and I just basically just went back and re-recorded the whole thing just to make sure that I got it right, and it felt great. It felt great being a part of that.
Well, that was a little bit later because the first book was actually called My Family is Different, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
publisher was so small, it almost looks like a pamphlet. Like the book is so tiny, but it's good for small hands, which was the point. But
Yeah.
The Golden Rule is like the sequel to that, which came a few years later. And I was like, as soon as you talked to me about doing the audiobook for it, I was like, yes, please,
Uh,
because anytime you want as many platforms for your work to go, you want
mhm.
as many avenues. And I've been hoping to have somebody do some audiobook work for me. So that was really perfect. And I was so excited, so grateful. It
It
was
was fun.
awesome.
It was fun to do. It was a lot of fun to do. I think that wound up being my fourth title. I think that so yeah, that and I'm very proud of that one. I'm really glad that you liked it. I'm glad that I was able to contribute to it. And one of those that I was definitely just of the mindset of, let's just do a royalty share. Let's not worry about like putting any money down. It's a kid's book. We can go ahead and if you want me to, I'll just go ahead and start doing this right away. And sure enough, you were open to that, and I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, we were totally on the same page, which is really great when you're writers.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about like what. So you got the children's book out. The My Family is Different.
Mhm.
And what was that like actually getting that first book out? Something that had your name on it, something that you can actually hold in your hands, knowing that it was going to be in bookstores at some point.
It was very surreal. I mean, because we were in an indie publisher or with an indie publisher, Star Dragon Publishing, which nobody's really ever heard of, I did have to reach out to local bookstores to get my book in the stores. But,
Mhm.
Subterranean Books in St. Louis in the Loop is like that's always been my book haven. And when I got to see it, they put it in the window, and
Oh,
I was just
nice.
I'm looking at this in awe, going, I'm an author now.
Tell
This
me you got
is this is
pictures. Tell me.
I do. Of course I do. That
Oh,
had
yeah.
to happen. I was just clicking away, just in awe of it. And it was very humbling too, because I felt like, I wasn't one of these people who I don't have a BA or a master's in literature or anything like that. I'm
Mhm.
just like a poor Irish kid, from these rinky-dink apartments in St. Louis. And to have that, I felt like it was just an opportunity that it almost felt like fate, like,
It was
okay,
validation. Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. It's like everything that you've been really kind of yearning for. It's like, it's all worth it. It's all,
Yeah.
yeah. So, so did Subterranean Books? I still need to work with Subterranean Books. By the way, I feel like I've missed that opportunity to do any sort of business with them. I really want to do that. Especially,
They
they're
are.
still around, correct?
Oh, yeah. And
Okay.
they're super friendly. I know that with all the COVID stuff, there's been a lot of restrictions, especially in St. Louis. We're not as restricted. I'm on the other side of the river now. I'm in St. Peter's,
Oh,
which
no
was
kidding.
hard. It was hard to make that jump, but we have less restrictions because we're in a more, spread out area now. Like I'm on a third of an acre, so I feel
Oh,
like
wow.
I'm hosting a mini farm. We're thinking about getting chickens now. But Subterranean Books, before all of the pandemic stuff, they were the most friendly local bookshop. They're very good to their authors too. So they have, you can get your books into their stores easily, but if you do a book signing with them, they
Hmm.
want to be the first place that you do a book signing, but they pack the house, and you'll be up there at the podium reading your stuff and talking to your readers and your fans. And I did for the Golden Rule. That
Hmm.
was, my second children's book. We did that. Me and Laura, we went up there and we packed the house. I mean, we were at full capacity, and it was one of those just great days where you felt the love in the
Wow.
room. Everybody was so friendly.
Oh, that's great. So you
Yeah.
went in with the boxes of books, or did they reach out and order the books first?
I contacted them.
Right.
That's the thing, when you're an indie author,
Consignment.
bookstores. Yeah, consignment and whatnot. But with the book sale, with the book signing, they have a little bit more leeway with you, and you get a little bit more off the top. So
Oh, even better.
yeah, when you're selling at the signing, because they like that. They want you to come in and draw more people in, and it's a, a win-win situation for both parties. So it's definitely worth it to reach out and not be afraid to, contact local shops. And I have in the past, I've reached out to national shops and just been like, will you put this in your store? And it boosts sales. It really does, because some local shops will be like, oh, sure, this sounds like a cute little story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, it's hard if you're an introvert. I'm an extrovert, you know that. Like
Oh yeah.
I love people. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's good to reach out.
I feel like I myself am like an extrovert trapped in an introvert's body.
I get that. Yeah.
I want, there is so many times I want to get out there and, put myself out there at the best possible platforms. But then there's always that fear of, of rejection or whatever that just kind of like makes me pull back a lot. So it's something that I definitely need to get over. It's like and this show has been a real big boost toward that. Just getting to have all these terrific interviews and getting to meet all these great people. And so many of them are already friends, but at the same time, just like getting the privilege of hearing their story, just like I'm hearing yours. So that I hope will continue to help. And I would definitely love to work with Subterranean. They sound like a great group to work with.
Absolutely. I really just, I can't say enough about them.
Yeah. So you have that first book, obviously the signing at Subterranean. Now, when you say you packed the house, how many are we talking, like 50?
Yeah, about 50. I mean, for a book, it's not like we're at the Carnegie Hall and we've got thousands of people. I mean, it's about 50. I think capacity might have been 60 or 70, but it felt like there were just people like everywhere.
Fabulous. That is fabulous. I love that. I love that. So now you have, there's the children's books, but there's also the nonfiction and the speculative fiction.
Yes.
What came first? What came next, I should say?
This is a bit of a long story. The speculative fiction came next. Speculative fiction to me, like I grew up reading like Roald Dahl, so it's kind of like a mix of the children's and the speculative fiction, and Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury's a big one on me. Yeah, so you mixing those two is kind of great.
Grouping right there.
Yeah. But my first husband, we're divorced, it was not right for me. And there's a whole long story there, which of course, anytime you attach yourself to somebody and then you realize it's just wrong, it's very hard on everybody. But he was so big on sci-fi and fantasy, and he was very big on Neil Gaiman. And I like Neil Gaiman. His work is good, but a lot of it's just retellings, and some of it is very thin work. It doesn't have a lot of extreme depth. And Ray Bradbury, his work is so deep. Sometimes you really have to chisel at it. And it's literature. And he introduced me to Charles DeLint, who is like the Canadian Neil Gaiman, and his work is kind of follows the same vein, but it is a little deeper. So I do like him a lot. But the speculative fiction, it started out as me almost trying to appease this person in my household, because he wanted to be a writer. And I feel bad. I feel like I kind of stole that from him. But I was always a creative person. I had a background in music, and music was so good to me because of the storytelling elements of songwriting. That was a big deal to me. So I was able to infuse that as I kind of veered into this whole other career that I didn't even realize I was going toward. And so there was a point, and it's kind of a sad thing, but when the first children's book was coming out, I was really nervous because I didn't know how well it was going to do. I didn't know if it was going to be well received. You know how it goes before, even if it's your 50th book, like right before it's released, you start getting real anxious, real nervous. You can't sit still, and you have to distract yourself.
Oh yeah.
And
I remember being a mess the night before the second edition of Excelsior was launched. I was a mess. And my wife can definitely say that. I'm like, I was looking for like the worst possible like stories and everything, just as an excuse to just start bawling. Like it was, I was really, not not in a happy place where I should have been. Where I should, like, my book is coming out. Like I got, like my publisher put the poster in the bookstore window. Like everything seemed like everything was where it should be. And then all of a sudden I was just like, just a mess.
Yeah, it's like, thank heavens for our support systems. But I realized at that point that my support system wasn't very supportive, because we went for a hike. Because I love being in nature. I'm a big nature nut. And we went to Castlewood State Park and we were just walking the trails. And I love being there, just kind of reminding myself of where I come from and what really matters in life. And we were walking, and I guess I was probably repeating myself and just kind of letting the anxiety out a little bit too much. But he just got so angry and shouted at me, "It's just a children's book." And that hurt so bad. I don't know if he meant it that way, but to me, it felt like my career didn't matter to him, because I wasn't really writing real literature. I was just writing work for children. And so I spent the next year or two, even though the children's book hit number 18 in our genre on Amazon, which we know Amazon genres are everything, but there's so many of them, it's not that hard, but it felt really good to know that we were in the top 20. And so, but at the same time, I had this little cloud hanging over me that the man who was supposed to support me thought less of my work because I wasn't doing the work that he liked. So I tried to start, and I loved sci-fi and fantasy, but to me, it's such a big genre, looking at Ray Bradbury and Edgar Rice Burroughs and these big names that I really love, Ursula K. Le Guin, trying to live up to that. I really struggled, and I was writing all these short stories, and I started a series. I was trying to do like the serialized novel. That's where Embracing Entropy came in.
Yeah.
And I really loved that story, and writing it is so important to me. And it was a big part of me discovering who I am as an author, and that, speculative fiction is for me to write, but it's something that's more of a fringe thing that I do when I need to take the pressure off of the more structured writing that I do that gets a little bit more love.
Yeah.
But that was when the marriage started falling apart, was when he, was shouting at me that it's just a children's book. And I'll never forget that. And that will always be with me. And it just, he never wanted to celebrate with me. When things came out, every time I had a book release, every time I had a new short story in a publication, he was just like, "That's great," and then would walk away. And it hurt so bad.
Oh man, that's such a shame. They just don't.
I don't think he meant it. I don't know. I don't think he consciously was doing that either.
Yeah. But still, like that, that they just, people don't realize just how important a support system is for an author, for any sort of creator who has to do something alone, who has to go it alone. Having the support of someone, just some pats on the back, just the attaboys or whatever, it really makes a difference. It really does.
Well, and my kids did that a lot. It was funny because where he was telling me, "Oh, you're just a children's writer," I had Anna, I guess she was a toddler when I started writing, and she's like my editor at this point. She's 11 and she's such a bookworm. She reads everything before it comes out, and she goes through and she'll find the mistakes, because I'm dyslexic, and she knows that and she's not. So it's really funny that she was the one who kind of was telling me, "Mommy, you're better than this. Don't listen to him."
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was strange.
Now you're talking, yeah.
Yeah, and both of them, once Lexi was born and she was able to articulate it, the two of them were just so gung-ho about my work that when the divorce came, we were the Three Musketeers. They really helped me through that. And I tried to do my motherly duties and telling them, this is not your fault. You're good kids and your dad loves you and I love you and we're going to get through this. And there are different types of families and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm remarried now, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because it's been like a 180. My real husband is what I like to call him, because he is that support system. He is the one who's always like, anytime I'm not sure about something, he's like, you need to do this. This
Yeah.
is what you do. You're the only person who can do it the way that you do it. And man,
that's fabulous.
Hearing that, it really matters.
Yeah. And you have another kid too, right?
Yeah, I have 2 now. Oh my gosh, I had a quarantine baby.
Wow.
I did. I had my son Wyatt, I guess in 2018, and then in 2020 we had Carlin, named after George Carlin, just to mess with everybody. Yeah,
that is fabulous.
He was born in September. We did not plan it that way. We were talking about having another child, and we conceived right before the pandemic set in.
Oh, wow.
And I'm a big home birther. So it worked out like our house didn't really change that much. We're on 1/3 of an acre. I'm a writer. I write for a local company, so I get to write for a living.
Yeah.
And then, I do home births. So we just called the midwife, and she was like, oh yeah, sure. I'll be over, and we did our regular visits, and it was nothing. Actually, Carlin came out so easily. She walked in the door a minute after he was born.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Someday I'll write about the home birthing experiences, because I've had 4 of them, but last year was a crazy year, and we've all been looking to this year as just this beacon of hope. And there's been so many bright spots in this year, so much good news and good energy from everybody in the creative industries, and there's a lot of good out there right now.
Absolutely. I love that he was named after George Carlin too. Like that's fabulous. I had a you'll appreciate this. I had in the late 90s, I was doing just like part-time work for this old software consulting center. And the second floor of our building was one of the higher end salons. So it's like, it was like John Mahan or something like that.
Yeah.
It was one of those you had to get a reservation for, And so I am coming back from lunch. I have my lunch in hand. I'm going back up to the office, and two other guys get in there. They start, chatting with each other. And I sit, and just as the door is shutting, I hear room for one more. And I stick my arm out, and George Carlin walks in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That would be so amazing.
He says thank you. I say, no problem. The door shuts, and I look over at it. The other 2 guys are just still yapping away at each other. They're completely oblivious. But I look over at George. He looks over at me, and he smiles, and I smile back, and I just nod. And as if I was saying, like, I know who you are. I'm not saying a thing.
I'm not going to bother you, Mr. Carlin.
Right. And then, the second floor comes out. Apparently he had a reservation. He gets out and everything. He nods back to me. I nod back to him. And that was it. And then, the 2 guys start going like, I think that was George Carlin. It was just like, you guys.
That's so cool, though. I'm very, very jealous now.
It was great. It was definitely like, it's one of those top celebrity moments for me.
Yeah.
That was so cool. To me, like Carlin is the greatest, it will always be. And knowing that his legacy is, kind of carried on through your son, I think that's terrific. Now, obviously, when he gets a little bit older, he's going to be introduced to his material.
There's a wide body of work there. He did some of the more PC stuff too, which he was not a huge fan of, but it's good
Mr.
for the
conductor. Yep.
Yeah, and and he did the voice for Thomas the Train, but he also did some of his stand-up like in the 80s, in the early 80s. It was a little flat. Like he was talking about like dogs and football and whatnot. My kids love that stuff. So I'm like, there's an evolution. You can start with the easy stuff and then just kind of bring them into it in adulthood, and it comes full circle.
Absolutely. I remember the Life is Worth Losing special that he did, and it felt just kind of a downer. Like it was, it wasn't as strong, and it felt more didactic and everything. It just didn't feel like the energy was there. But then he turns around, like in 2008, he does It's Bad For You, and it's back in, like, I mean, it's a shining bright light of just like, I'm back. and it was just an amazing feeling. So I'm so glad that even though he's not with us anymore, I'm so glad that he went out on that high of a note. That to me really, really is something. I'm just glad he didn't go out with Life Is Worth Losing. I'm glad he went out with It's Bad For You, because that was just a terrific, terrific special. So getting back to you though, so you have the speculative fiction. I didn't know that it was serialized too. That's really cool. So that's kind of what I did with From Parts Unknown. So with you, did you basically just have all the parts kind of combined in one omnibus edition? Did you have them sold separately? What pattern did you choose with that?
I went with a newer indie publisher who was a friend of a friend. She was starting her own company, and she was, just getting herself seasoned. And she loved the Embracing Entropy story. And I told her I have 3 parts, and I wanted it to be a trilogy because I hate sequels, but I love trilogies. So if there are 3 parts, I'm okay with the second one. I'm not okay with it if it's 1 and 2, but I don't know why. That's my weird number OCD. But so I had this book that I'd already written called By the Stars. And it was this great epic sci-fi journey. Earth is dying and the people don't really know why it's dead, but they're getting onto the ship, and this alien race has come to save us, basically. And they're these very benevolent people. They don't understand selfishness or jealousy or anything like that. And so it starts with them boarding the ship. And it's this mom and her kids, and they're going on this journey across the stars. And her husband is a military man with the Air Force. And so he's staying behind just for a short while to help make sure they get everybody that they can off the planet before it collapses. And so it's kind of like an immigrant story, and how they struggle to assimilate with the new people, and how the new people have struggles. And there's a little bit of clashing there, but the friendships that they make across those boundaries and things like that, those are so real to me and so important. I grew up in a diverse area, so I feel like that carries over into my work. And I was just so excited about it. But I also am a dyslexic author, and I did not have a great editor at the time. So it was released, just that part. The first part was released as a novella ebook. And then we were going to do the second part and the third part as ebooks. And then the whole edition was eventually bound in print. But there, I do have to say, if you go back and you read it now, and it's out of print, so sometimes it gets kind of pricey online, which is very strange when you see your work going for $200 online.
And you're not getting a dime of it?
No, and at the same time, I'm like, I don't want people to pay that much for my work ever. Like, I feel like my work should not be, not that it's not good enough to be that expensive, but that, like, my work is for everybody. I grew up really poor, so when people are paying that much for my book, I feel like it's kind of a middle finger to the people out there who can't afford that. And I don't like that. I'm not okay with that. So someday, if I ever could, I'd like to get it back in print. But it just didn't have the run that I wanted it to, because there were a lot of technical errors and some mistakes in there, and just easy little things that could have been fixed if I had had an editor with a better eye. And I look back on it, and it was a great learning experience, though, because everybody who loves the book is like, I really love the story. You really drove it home. And they were like, the mistakes don't matter because I really liked what you did with the characters. And it's good to hear that. It is really good to hear that. But at the same time, like, my mom and my sister are my biggest critics. Like, they think they're editors. So if they are not appeased, I know I did something wrong. And my sister's like, I just can't read this book, Jessie. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to re-edit it and republish it someday. Nice. I'm not at that point yet. Maybe when I'm like 50 or something. I don't know. But that journey doing the serialized novel, I felt, I was like, oh, I'm tapping into Dickens now, because that's, that was his big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane Eyre was like that too. And Jane Eyre is a huge story for me. I love that story, the Gothic with the Cinderella weirdness and the satire too. There are satirical elements. She's like making fun of romance stories at the same time. I love all of that stuff. So, but Embracing Entropy has like this bittersweet but great love, these passion projects that I've done. That's really what the speculative fiction became, because I was trying so hard to please my ex-husband when we were married, trying to prove to him that I was good enough. I wasn't just a children's book author, I was an author.
Right.
And I guess that was a good part of my life, even though it didn't work out in my personal relationship, because for my career, it told me that I really wanted this.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up wanting to be a writer. I thought writers were supposed to be drunk old men like Hemingway who hated everything. Women were evil. I can't write. I'm a woman, like all that silliness, which is ridiculous. But it definitely pushed me to work harder. And the short stories, I think, that I still write, because I'm not really doing novels anymore in speculative fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much right now. I could revisit it someday, but the short stories in speculative fiction, they just pour out of me. I have a nightmare or I have a dream and I wake up and I'm like, this has to happen.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
doing
great.
this today.
Yeah. So there's speculative fiction, but then there's an interesting little wrinkle in all of this, and that's the nonfiction.
Oh, the nonfiction.
All right. So let's paint this picture. So you've already gotten the children's books out. You've made some headway with speculative fiction, but then there's nonfiction, which is not normally something that people would immediately go toward, especially when when they have set themselves up as fiction writers. So not to say that they don't ever happen. Obviously, like one of my favorite books of all time is Stephen King's book on writing.
Right.
So what was it for you? What was that sort of impetus that moved you in that direction?
So at the beginning, we have to rewind here. Yep. When I'm starting my children's book, I had a friend who, well, I guess there were a couple of incidents. I went to the Pagan Picnic in St. Louis at Tower Grove Park, which is this huge event, and it's just people from all walks of life. Everybody's welcome. My mom's a Christian, my sister's an atheist, and they love coming.
Yeah.
And it's just people hanging out and sharing their love of life, and there's vendors with food, and I always sell books there, which they shut down last year, of course, and they're canceled for this year, but eventually I hope they do return. But I went to the kitty corner with my daughter before Lexi was born. So it was my eldest, Anna, and we were just, doing a little craft, and I was talking to the lady who was running the table, and she was asking me about being a pagan parent, because, there aren't a lot of people who talk about, you talk about parents who are Christian and parents, who are Jewish. There are lots of children's books, about monotheistic religions, but not so much in the pagan religions. Mm-hmm. And so we were just talking, and she was like, you need to write this down because you articulate it very well. And so I thought about it, and there was a pagan children's author there, Wes Lyon Martin, I do believe. She wrote like An Ordinary Girl, A Magical Child. Mm-hmm. And I went to her booth and I bought one of her books, and I have this thing, and maybe I shouldn't share it. I don't know. I might be stealing, but I looked at her bio and I saw where she was published. And that's how I've always learned where to go for work. I look at these authors' bios and I say, where have they been published? And I go to that publisher and see if they're looking for anything. And maybe that is a good thing to share. I guess at the beginning, I felt like I was stealing some big secret or something. But like, if you just look at somebody's bio and you see where they've been published, it gives you that groundwork of where you should start from. Mm-hmm. Where should I go if I want to be a writer, or if I want to tap into a larger market? Where should I go? Look at people's bios. Do it. Absolutely. But her bio mentioned The Witch's Voice. And I was looking, and there were all of these other pagan authors who had written for Witchbox, which was it was like a pagan networking site. It was like almost like a social media, but they accepted essays and articles. So I just wrote up something about being a pagan parent and how it's not really that different from being any kind of, every parent has the same kind of struggles. We all want our children to be happy and healthy and well-adjusted and to find their own little groove in life. And so I kind of put that in there because I like to talk about our similarities instead of dividing everybody up. We get so politicized lately, and a lot of people, it's like we're almost afraid to step out of our little box now, which is completely contrary to what I was raised to believe. We're supposed to meld and mix and have fun with each other. And so I wrote an article about it, and it got published right around the same time. Actually, that was before My Family is Different. But I didn't consider myself a writer. I just considered myself somebody who was doing what I was asked to do. Somebody asked me to publish an article, so I did. And that was in 2011. And I think My Family was Different. My Family is Different came out in 2014. So this is a little bit more to the beginning of that story, but I didn't realize that it was my beginning. That's so weird, piecing it all together. But that article, it did so well. I got fan mail. And I was like,
Really?
What? Yeah, I had all these people messaging me. And one of my first readers was this Christian pastor in Pennsylvania. I think his name was Roger. And I haven't heard from him in a while. I hope he's okay. But he was a very old man. And he just connected right away. And he was like, I am so glad I found your work because I'm trying to teach the people in my congregation about how we really are all made to be together and how every faith has some truth and that it comes from love, that all of it comes from love. And it was just, hearing this from this man, and we went back and forth for years. Every time I published something, he was right there telling me to keep writing and thanking me for sharing my perspective in such a grounded way. Because, some people in the pagan community, they're very unapproachable. There's some people who play into stereotypes and whatnot, and that's okay. If that's who you are, that's fine. Stereotypes are there because some people do act that way. But I don't wear all black, and I don't really do a lot of the deeper spell work stuff. I'm more into meditation, and to me, spell work is just physical prayer. The reason you light a candle is so that you can physically feel the presence of the energy of your prayers that you're sending out to your God or to your gods. And so that element really connected with him, and it connected with so many people. I kept writing nonfiction, and I ended up, a friend of mine came over and she was like, the St. Louis Examiner is looking for columnists. And I was like, they're never going to pick me. I have no experience. She's like, well, you wrote that one article for that one place. And I was like, that one article from that one place. She didn't even remember the name, I was like, that sounds like the most amateur, resume you could imagine. And I sent in, I was like, well, what's my angle? Well, what did I write about? I wrote about paganism. I'll be the St. Louis Pagan Examiner. And I pitched them. I was like, I'm just a mom, but I do happen to be pagan, and I have written about it. And I think I could expand on that. And they picked me up right away. It was my first gig. It was amazing.
Wow.
to get paid to write, at the very start, I was very fortunate, and I feel like it was the right place at the right time. I was very, very lucky and blessed, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I just kept working. And it wasn't until My Family is Different came out that I realized that I was a writer. Even though I had been writing since 2011, it was 3 years of writing articles and just little things here and there. And I did always write the little short stories because when you're a writer, whether you realize it or not, you wake up and you write something and you set it aside, and eventually you think about publishing it if you're going to be an author.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So that just snowballed from there, and
now,
sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. The big thing is, of course, going from these nonfiction articles, and then all of a sudden here you are in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Now, tell us how that happened, because that is really fascinating. How you were able to get in there.
That was such a big deal. It was my first time being able to walk into any Barnes and Noble and find my book. Oh my gosh. I could go
Wow.
in any city and any town and
Yeah.
find my work in a book. And I was crying. I was just like, it's one of those moments where you go, I've made it. But
Hmm.
then you're like, oh no, the bar is raised. I have to keep working.
Yeah.
But the Chicken Soup for the Soul book, I did, we did Writers in the Park together, and
Yep.
you were such a fun table mate that I was like, I need to do more events. I had branched out to the Pagan Picnic, and I was doing local events. And then I decided to check out the local libraries, and the
Hmm.
St. Charles County Library. I don't want to say anything against St. Louis, but the St. Louis libraries they're very a little bit snobbier as to who they promote. So I
I
had
noticed that. Yeah, it's just like they reach out to the big names first.
Yep.
That the big publishers are really pushing, and they don't seem to give much attention to the local authors, which is a shame. Which is a shame.
It is, because we're such a friendly and lively bunch of people. We like
We're
to,
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, we are. Well, and that's what I'm like. Like your Excelsior series, like I love reading that, and I just
Oh,
like,
thank you.
yeah. I keep thinking, like, when is the St. Louis County Library going to have like a giant spotlight on you? And maybe they have already, and I don't know of it yet.
No, they haven't. No.
No,
But
someday
at the
it's
at
going
the
to
same
happen.
time, to its credit though, I need to get my own ass in gear and get Greater Glory finished so I can finish up that trilogy. So I could say,
True.
here's a complete story here. So yeah. So,
That's what I'm waiting for a box set to come out with all three of them, because I have the first one, and I think I got the Kindle version of the second one, because I don't think it's on my bookshelf right now, the second, but I'm like, I'm waiting for that box set to come out, George.
me too. Me too.
But
I think it was what was it? Dorothy Parker who said, "I loathe writing. I love having written."
yeah.
And that's where I am right now. Getting this draft done. It was just like, every word that comes out now is just like, I'm so glad I wrote that. Let's move on to the next
Yes.
one. And it's like, and trying to get this damn book finished. It's been sitting in my head for so long that it's finally time to just get it out there. And I know my publisher agrees with me. So
Yeah. Fiction is like that. Fiction is, to me, harder. Fiction is so hard because you are not just writing a story, you're creating a world. You
mhm.
have to create characters from scratch, whether you're drawing from somebody in your life or not. You are walking into an empty room and having to craft your own furniture. You're having to, take ingredients and build your own recipe. Like, I am the most non-structured fiction writer. I guess I should say, I started out no outline, no idea of where I was going. It was completely just like a meditative work. And it was so hard. That is the hardest thing you can possibly do in writing.
Yeah.
Whereas
Just creating something out
nonfiction,
of nothing. Yeah.
yeah, and nonfiction is just like, well, a lot of the nonfiction I do is creative nonfiction. So I'm just
Mhm.
telling a story of what happened to me, and drawing from it, and so I give myself, I'll write out to remember it, because it gets rusty after a while. I'll write down, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, and
Mhm.
then you just slowly fill it in as you remember what happened. Now, with more structured nonfiction, because I have started doing some reporting, that's harder, because if you want to report, you have to be, at least I know the journalistic integrity nowadays has gone so far out the window that I feel like it's easier for me, even if I do have a little bit of a bias. I really try to set that aside, though, because
Mhm.
I'm old school in that sense, that if you're reporting the news to people, you can have your own angle. That's cool, but you need to be reporting facts. You need
Yeah.
to make sure that you have it correct, and that you're not, pandering to one specific group of people over the whole of everyone, and the whole of truth. Truth is
Mhm.
very, very important in nonfiction,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to capture that, but it's easier to write it, because you can write out the facts and then fill everything in between.
Mhm.
Um, so I did an event at the St. Charles County Library out here in Missouri, and it was an indie author event, and they do it every year in November, and it's really fun, because you get to there are less readers coming in to buy your work, but there are so many authors. You network so well if you're friendly.
Mhm.
And I met this table of little old ladies. And I love little old ladies because I am a little old lady at heart. Since I was a little kid, I love baking cookies. I love telling people to go wash their hands. And, like it's funny because I like to get dirty. I'm the person who wants to get in the mud, but then afterwards I'm like, okay, we all need to wash our hands.
Right.
So like I've always felt like a little old lady. I'm a bit of a Kanga from Winnie the Pooh. I like to mother people a little bit. And so I just was hanging out with these little old ladies, and they were selling their Chicken Soup for the Soul books. They both had been in so many Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And I was like, well, how do you get into one of these books? Because I like those. And I didn't realize that the series had grown so much. They do multiple books every year on different subjects. Sometimes it's stories about your dog or inspirational stories about, the time someone helped you through a really rough time. And I went on their website because I was directed. They said, well, just go on their website. They have submission calls regularly. And I was like, what?
Oh.
They're just asking people to send in material? And they were like, yep, you don't have to have an agent or anything. And I was like, this is exactly what I need because I am.
Hell, I'm doing that.
Yeah, I am 10 years of professional writing come June 19th. Juneteenth was a very special day for me. And I used to sing in the Black community a lot. So that day has a lot of meaning to me and the Black community. But I do believe Juneteenth was the first day I ever got published back in 2011. And so I'll be 10 years a writer coming up here soon. And I do not have an agent, have never had an agent. And for some reason, I keep getting work. And I thank my lucky stars every damn day.
Wow.
Every day, because people have been so good to me, the readers and the writers, the writing community. But I went online and they were looking for stories about teachers.
Oh.
Now, I am a homeschooling mom, but I don't consider myself a teacher in the sense that they were looking for. They wanted education stories from the education system. And I have a deep love of teachers. Anybody who can go into any school system and captivate and teach a group of, 20 to 30 young minds, that is work. That is work. It's hard enough just doing it with 4 kids. And one of them's a baby. So it's really just 3 right now. And the other one's a toddler. So if we're really narrowing it down, I'm only educating 2 kids at the moment and at home. And that was just because, when we started, we were in an unaccredited school district and the kids just loved the homeschooling so much. It's their choice every year. Do you want to keep doing it this way or do you want to go into public education? And they like being at home, which worked out for us last year. I felt like we were ahead of the curve there.
Oh yeah.
But I was thinking about all of the different things in my life because there were a lot of teachers who filled in the role of my parents a lot of times. My mom, she worked so hard for us, but she worked a lot. She didn't have a college education when I was growing up, and she married a man who had he had the Irish disease, and he was, not always very, very easy with me. So, and I try not to open up about that too much because I don't want to be unfair to people. I have seen him in recent years and he's fine and good tempered, but he just, when the drinking and the rage mixed, it's not good for kids or pets. And there are some stories there that are very heartbreaking that I don't like delving into, but I had teachers who, especially male teachers, when you have an issue with your father in your life, you have to have some kind of male father figure. And my maternal grandpa really filled that in a lot. My mom's parents were always there for me when my mom was working 18-hour days and my dad was gone for the whole weekend drinking and whoring, whatever. I know that sounds like old fashioned, but that's what he was doing. Yeah. And so I had some really cool male teachers though who were there, and I also had some really great female teachers who kind of pulled my mom aside. And it was a 4th grade teacher who said that I should be a writer, and I laughed at her at the time. It's so funny. She was very sweet. I think her name was Mrs. Wheeler, and at Hannah Woods Parkway District, she was such a good teacher. But she pulled my mom aside, and she was the one who told her about my dyslexia. And she presented it in a way that it wasn't a disorder because people didn't really understand a lot about dyslexia at the time, but that that it was my hand and my brain just couldn't communicate.
Mm.
That's how she put it. She was like, her hand is moving so fast, her brain just can't keep up. And that, I am a hyper person. It's hard for me to sit still too. So hearing it put in that way, and then having that same person tell me that I should be a writer
Mm.
was
There you
a
go.
positive influence. And I didn't even notice it until years later. But when I write, I'll drop vowels or I'll put them in the wrong place. And when I'm typing, it carries over too. It's so weird. Your spell check is the most amazing tool in the world. I really love it. And I'm really great that I can't believe my eldest, she's such a great editor. She always asks, "Can I read your stuff, Mom? I'm gonna fix it for you." And I'm like, "Thank you."
Oh, that's so nice.
But
That's so nice.
yeah, but later in high school, things got really rough. Man, I don't even know where to start. My relationship with my father, we hit a point where I broke away from him. My mom left, and my sister and I, we went with her, and I ended up dating a guy who was kind of a lot like him. And
Mm.
so, there was weirdness there. And it was really weird though, because after we broke up, I knew it was, we had to break up because he was cheating on me and he was leaving bruises on me and all this stuff.
Oof.
And when we broke up, we were still trying to be friends because we were in the same circle still, and it's
Yeah.
funny how the circles you run with, you don't realize a lot of it is a perpetuating cycle. I related to the kids who were from broken families and who had been abused, but at the same time, some of us weren't realizing it and we were abusing each other.
Mm.
And I feel really bad about that. There was substance abuse on some of my friends' parts, not so much with me. I don't like being out of control of my body. I'm a bit of a control freak, very
Hmm.
much so. Drinking is something that I have to keep in check, but that's easier when you're a parent, in my eyes at least, because I always look at my kids and I'm like, okay, well, this is not even coming in the house anymore. But yeah, we were trying to be friends, but he was still leaving bruises on my body, and
Mm.
that just, you can't you can't have that in your life. But I didn't realize it yet, and I hadn't seen my dad in like 6 months. My mom was working at the Chrysler plant, and I was working a job. So I had a lot of these adult things going on in my life, but I was still an adolescent. I was 16 years old, and I was working, and I was basically living by myself because my mom worked nights, and I never saw her really.
Hmm.
And my grandpa had passed away, which he was the father figure in my life. And when he was gone, my mom spiraled out of control because she had just gotten out of a relationship that was abusive as well. And so it was, it's weird because my dad never really laid a hand on her. He took more of his frustration out on me because I'm the mouthy one. But
Mm.
but
Gotcha.
he was very demeaning toward her, and he was openly, she couldn't have any friends because he would cheat on her with them, or they would come to her and say, he's been hitting on me. And my mom, she didn't know how to handle it, so she was just like, oh well, I don't know what to say, and they would just distance themselves. So she had
Mm.
like no friends. She was very lonely, and so was I, even though I had a large group of friends, because all of us were kind of broken at the time. And I ended up, there was one party I went to at a friend's house, and I got really really drunk, and my ex-boyfriend called me and said some very nasty things to me.
Mm.
And I'm always the lighthearted person, so
Yeah.
people don't, sometimes people mistake me for an airhead because I like to laugh. I like to joke around,
Hmm.
and I am an intelligent person, and it's taken a long time for me to be able to say that to myself. But
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You are. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. But I kept a lot of that, I keep a lot of that inside. I was a bookworm, but I didn't really talk about literature with people because I was hanging out with a bunch of, broken kids who sometimes they thought that was kind of stupid.
Hmm.
Oh, you're reading this book? Oh, and that's kind of funny because I don't know even how to describe that, because there were people in that group who were also very smart, and I think they had the same problem.
Hmm.
Um, so I got really, really drunk, and I had him saying mean things to me. And then one of my best friends was really mean to me. And it was like everything escalated. I hadn't
Yeah.
talked to my sister in a while. She had gone off to college, and I was just feeling so alone. And I went into the bathroom and I opened up the medicine cabinet. I've never done anything like that in my life.
Oh boy.
And I found a bottle of pills, and I just drank it down, and I was gone.
Yeah.
And It's stupid because I don't even, it was a bottle of Advil. So that was not going to kill me.
Right.
I didn't know that. It's really funny now to look back on it and be like, what were you thinking, you stupid kid?
Right. Might as well have just been taking vitamins.
Right. Well, it did fuck up my stomach. Sorry. It messed up my stomach pretty bad. And it could have caused kidney failure. So I ended up an inpatient for a week, and I was in it was like being in a mental institution with a bunch of teenagers, which to me is like worse than being in a mental institution with adults because I don't know, but I feel like my generation, and I really want to stress this to anybody listening, especially young people, there has been like so many stories of that from our era that I just want to stress so hard. It's not glamorous. It's not funny. It's not something that anybody needs to go down. And I feel like I chose that path because I had seen so many like stars on TV talking about, oh, it's such a dark time, so I just tried to kill myself. And then I don't know why that influence, or I mean, like, other people should always tell their stories, but because I didn't have somebody properly guiding me, that came up in my brain at that time. And it sparked such a stupid action that, my stomach is still, I'm a pharmacophobe now. I won't take a freaking aspirin at this point because it just messed with me so horribly. My stomach is still quite sensitive, but and I keep myself in check on the drinking, but I'll never drink wild turkey again because that's what we had that night.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was such a tumultuous time in my life. And I had one English teacher who recognized how much I loved literature. And during that period, before that escalated, he realized I was reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. I was very big on reading this epic poem because I really hate poetry, but I love epics.
Yeah.
I don't like, the simplified like 4 lines about a flower. Like, come on, like, no, anybody can do that. But these epic stories, Faust and Siegfried
Mythology.
and
Yeah.
yes, mythology. They resonate so well. And so I was reading that and he was very impressed. And he was like, this is like college level material. And so we were talking about different stories and he brought up, oh, what's the thing with Grendel? Oh my gosh, I can't even remember now. It's one of the epics. Beowulf. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
He brought up Beowulf and he put it in our curriculum and I hate Beowulf. I ended up hating it. I don't like the character. It's one of those epics that he's so cocky and there's so much, I want to pick it apart, but I'm not that great at writing epics myself. So maybe I shouldn't, but he, in the lessons, he realized that I wasn't connecting to the character. And he was like, you should read Grendel because it is a book from the monster's perspective. And so we started talking about how I love books like that. There's it's a middle grade book, I think, called A Time of Angels by Karen Hesse. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Where this Jewish girl, and it's in World War II. This is before concentration camps and it's World War I story. But it is still a Jewish girl who ends up getting the Spanish flu and ends up being cared for by this very benevolent older German man. And her parents are fighting the Bolsheviks in Russia. And so he's caring for her while she's sick. And she thinks he's this evil man because we're fighting the Germans. They're evil. And at some point, she realizes that he's being discriminated against by the people in America. And she's like, I wonder if German mothers are talking about the American monsters killing their children. And that perspective was so mind-blowing to me that I carried that over. I like those stories of both sides. Like, there are always 2 sides to a story. There are always still just people who are being people, even if they're on the wrong side of history or whatnot. And so he connected with that. We talked about that. And so he offered Grendel and we would talk about books a little bit before and a little after class. And it was just a bright spot in my life. And when I came back after I tried to kill myself, I think he struggled with it. And I didn't realize, my mom had to go in and talk to the administration about what had gone on in our lives.
Hmm.
And I don't know how much she told them about my father or the relationship I had been in or anything that we had been through. But my teachers knew all this information about me. And my friends were kind of, they were supportive, but they were kind of distant. And everybody kind of handled me with these like special gloves, like they were
Yeah.
afraid I was a bomb, I was going to go off. And me, once I make a mistake, it's like I'm done with it, So I got out of inpatient. I was like kissing the grass, and I was like, never again, never again. And I started hiking again and going back to places I had gone in my childhood to kind of reconnect with nature and why life really matters. And having going into school knowing that everybody knew this about you, and
Hmm.
and having to go to school with the person, with my ex-boyfriend who, kind of helped push me over the edge. It was just so dramatic and so not me. That English class, he was the only teacher who didn't treat me like that, who just treated me like a
Hmm.
person who had been through something and openly, was just like, okay, well, you know what? Everybody's been having a kind of a crappy year this year. We're going to have a special treat. We're going to watch Dead Poets Society.
Nice.
And I had never been introduced to that movie. And,
It's brilliant.
Mr.
So
Timmons
brilliant.
was my captain. He was,
Mhm.
oh, captain, my captain. Like he didn't, go against the system in the way that Mr. Keating did, but he saw what was going on, and he realized that literature was helping me, and so he gave me that extra oomph that I needed to get myself back where I needed to be. But he pulled me outside of class before the big scene at the end, and
Hmm.
I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it, but it
Yeah.
is, it's from the 80s. And he pulled me aside, and he said, I'm going to spoil the ending for you because of what you've been through, but the main character kills himself in the end. And I want to talk to you about this. And he just
Hmm.
kind of opened up about how I know you've been through a lot, but I don't want you to ever, ever do even consider anything like that ever again, because it's
Yeah.
just not right. You have so much energy to give to people. You're such a smart person, and you're so nice to everybody. And it felt good to have somebody openly just approach that in
Yeah.
such a friendly manner. And I promised him I never would, and I never will. And that just, I don't break promises. When I make promises to people, I don't break them.
Hmm.
'Cause, if enough people break promises for you, you realize how wrong that is. And that experience, it was so, like, I just spent forever talking about it. Sorry.
It's okay.
But we're having like a psychologist moment now. But I sat down and I wrote that story for A
Oh
Chicken
man.
for the Soul. And
And
I
that's
didn't,
and that's something and that's something that there are so many people out there that need to hear it, that are just kind of right at the brink of
yeah,
where you were, or even over that brink. And those words, who knows how many people, like put down the pills, or,
yeah.
stepped away from the medicine cabinet, or just stepped away from the ledge, like whatever they, like stepped down from the stool, whatever the case,
Yep.
just like to, not to be like, not to keep drumming up like different ways to be all morbid about it.
Right.
But I mean, what you've done, what you're continuing to do is important. And it's something that people need to be aware of. And that is something that I am so proud of you for getting it in there. That's a story that I know that they knew was going to do a lot of good.
Well, and that's the whole point of writing for me, is to connect with people and to make the world a better place. Not to get too, romantic about writing, because writing can be very, very frustrating, and it
Mhm.
is a job
Oh
when you
yeah.
really get into it. But I really feel like every single person on this planet has at least one story, whether it's a page long or whether it's 1,000 pages. There's at least one story that they have that's worth sharing with others.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yes. Yes. Now we have just a few minutes left here, but
oh yeah, sorry.
I wanted to make sure to ask you, for anyone that's out there who is on the brink of wanting to get a story out there, is they believe that there's something out there, they don't know exactly how to pursue it. What would you say would be the first step for an aspiring writer to get in gear?
I would say, well, I mean, if you're already considering it, you're already in gear. You just don't know it yet. I
Mm-hmm.
say, look up your favorite author's bio, the
Mm-hmm.
author that you want to be like. Look up where they've been published, like
Mm-hmm.
I did,
Yep.
and find the smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
I like to aim high, but if you get too many rejections in the beginning, it's really hard. And I got a
Yeah.
lot of rejections in the beginning of fiction. But if you look at the beginning of their career, look for their older stuff and what were the first publications that accepted them? What are
Yeah.
the ones that accept unsolicited material that doesn't require an agent? What are the smaller scale, maybe lower paying, or at the beginning you might not get paid at all, just the
Mm-hmm.
smaller stuff, and submit your work. And the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. And how you handle that no, that's up to you. But
Mm-hmm.
you're going to hear no. I remember this moment. Just a little side note here. I remember at the beginning thinking, what if I'm just that good that everyone's going to want to publish me right away? There's that hope. That's that
Yeah.
little kernel of hope in your brain. It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're going to be told no by somebody at some point.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And you need to get used to it, and you need to be prepared. Be prepared, be ready
Yeah.
to have a day of wallowing, or where you just have your best friend come over and you order pizza and you watch a comedy to lift your spirits, because you're going to need it. You're definitely going to need it.
Absolutely. And where can my listeners find you on social media?
I have scaled back my social media for various reasons. I think I'm going through my reclusive writer phase, or
Mhm.
more like my in-person writer phase. If you email me, I'm going to respond. If you send me a letter, or if I meet you on the street, I'm going to talk to you. But I left Twitter, and that was hard because I had 16,000 followers, and
Oh,
I was
wow.
very active on there. I was followed by Pauly Shore and Margaret Chow and
Nice.
Tay Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird to say that. Like, doesn't it seem like
I got followed by Tay Diggs too.
yes.
Tay is doing it. I gotta say, like Tay Diggs, if you're listening out there, first of all, hello, big fan, and
Yes.
you're doing it right, because what you're doing is what social media should be all about, which is connecting with the people that are out there. He's reaching out to creators.
Absolutely.
That may not have a name yet, but could very well be on their way to doing it. So first, and also Tay Diggs, if you want to come on the show,
he has a children's book. He might have two by now, but
you got an open invite. And yeah, you just inspired me. I got to reach out to Tay.
You should.
I can tell him. I saw him at the New York Theater Workshop in Rent in '96.
Oh my gosh.
Broadway. That's its own story. But
wow.
Yeah. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yes. I am always
looking
for new connections. And like Pauly Shore, I wrote a piece about him after he came here and I saw his show, and he thanked me. Like we corresponded just a little bit. He's very respectful. It's funny because how he presents himself as the persona versus who he is, or who we think he is. I don't know, all of that stuff. I think there's a little bit of a dividing line there, because he was very respectful and very nice. And I'm always trying to encourage stars to write a book, like some kind of an asshole. I'm like, you should write a book, and I'll help you if you want some help, even though I'm an amateur and I haven't been a bestseller yet. Right. But I did leave Twitter. There's just so much politics on there, and it took up a lot of time. So much time. And I miss it to a degree, because there were a lot of great fans on there. But I stepped away from Facebook. I think I left the author page active, but I haven't been on it in months. Facebook, it's so political. People are always shouting at each other, and they show you the political stuff above the happy stuff. I learned that the algorithms, they're trying to start fights, because I guess it gets more clicks, but I like the positive stuff. And so I stepped away from that. I left Instagram. I'm not really doing YouTube anymore. My Wacky Wednesdays are done. I am still on Pinterest, because that's a fun place to go. It's light, it's fun. You can find artists, you can find writers, you can find the creatives without all the politics. I like that. I like that a lot. I am on Pinterest. I am on Tumblr.
Mm-hmm.
Tumblr is a fun place for us nerds to go. The people who, when you're not like, it's hard to put certain people in a box. And I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
one of those people. And Tumblr is less boxy, I guess. So you can find me on Tumblr. And I am on Minds because I am a big free speech advocate. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
people should be assholes to each other, but it's our God-given right to be assholes if we want to.
Yep.
You can just block somebody if they're a jerk. That's my whole thing. Like, instead of, deplatforming people if you don't like their politics or what they're saying or whatnot, just block them. Why would so Minds is my home right now because there's so many people who are, it's kind of anti-government right now. A lot of libertarians, which I'm more of a middle of the road person. I am also reporting for the New American, which is a little more conservative, which is a weird area for me. But I've found, like, if you do write in politics right now, if you want to tell the truth, there's a lot of mainstream corporate media that is pandering to specific ideologies, and when you do that, sometimes you're leaving behind the truth. I like to look at everything. To me, it's like I want to absorb all the information and derive the truth for myself. But I do like writing for the New American. I like asking the tough questions that aren't being asked in media right now. So if you're not afraid to go into the politics route, that is where my political stuff is being written. And it's tough. I came out swinging, and they're impressed with me, but I worry about it because I want everybody to know that I love everybody on all sides of the spectrum. So my website is where all of it comes from. That's JessicaMarieBaumgartner.com. You will find the happy stuff there, the sad stuff, the angry stuff. There's a broad spectrum of nonfiction, speculative fiction, children's work up there. And that's where I go to really connect with the people. I'm very approachable. If you want to send me an email, I will respond to you. I've gotten hate mail for writing things before. And you know what? I always try to respond respectfully because I understand that my perspective is not the only perspective out there. And how I perceive truth might not be right sometimes. I know that I'm going to be wrong sometimes. And I want to be checked when I'm wrong. I want to know when I didn't hit the mark correctly. Yeah. So, and that's a hard part of being a writer is accepting that is part of your job. It's part of your job to know that sometimes you didn't do it right, and you need to acknowledge that. And I'm very big on that. If I hurt somebody in some way, I want you to reach out and say, this did not resonate with me, and this is why. And I'm not necessarily going to apologize for my work, but I am going to grow from it and make my work. I want to improve every day. Every day I want to improve. And my website is where I'm improving.
Awesome. And just like what Jessica said just before, everybody has a story in them. She is definitely a wonderful illustration of that because she has multiple stories in her, multiple genres in her, which I think is a real refreshing real refreshing thing when we're in this field where all of us are basically just put in little boxes. Just like with Tumblr, Jessica has a lot of different reaches, and I am looking forward to seeing just how many more she's got in her. So for Jessica Marie Baumgartner, this is George Sirois saying to all of you, ever upward, and I will see you next week. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. If you've never been an Audible customer and want to see what they offer, just go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Why Audible? Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. And with this free 30-day trial, you'll have your pick of it all. You can hear books of all genres narrated by Jim Dale, Stephen Fry, Will Patton, Alex Hyde White, Jeff Brick, Neil Shaw, William Demerit, and even a few by me, George Sirois. So go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and start your own 30-day journey with Audible today.